police. And I think that, once more, it is important to recognize that everyone should be on the same side of this. Right? Really, everyone should be on the same side of this. What we have seen here, and yet we are not, what we have seen here is a police officer kneeling on the neck of a black man for 4 straight minutes while he's being told by people, including the guy who is underneath his knee, that he cannot breathe. Okay, it's really, really ugly, and it's really, really bad. What is not clear is whether it is really, really racial. Now, the implication by the media is always that it is race-driven, because whenever there's a white officer doing something bad to a black suspect, the implication is that it is race-driven. But here's the reality. Police officers generally do a very good job. There are some police officers who are terrible at their jobs and jackasses and treat everybody horribly. We have not yet seen evidence that this police officer is a racist. As we will see, people were trying to manufacture evidence of that yesterday. But this thing has been handled the way it's supposed to be handled. These officers probably will end up standing trial. We don't yet have a medical examiner's report. So this is part of the problem when you're going to put somebody on trial for, say, negligent homicide, for manslaughter, or for murder, or for something like that. You actually have to determine cause of death, that this person died because he had a knee on the back of his neck. At the very least, the officer should go to jail for assault, you would assume, because this is not within the purview of employment. You don't get just to it's police brutality, obviously. The guy's saying he can't breathe, and people around the officer are saying, you need to get up off the guy, he can't breathe. I mean, it's just egregious. It's egregious, and he should be prosecuted, this officer, to the fullest extent of the law into which the evidence shows. And by the way, everyone agrees with this. Everyone agrees with this, right? There is no dissent on this particular point, from the Minneapolis mayor to civil rights leaders to President Trump to the Minneapolis Police Department. Everyone agrees. All 4 officers who are present here, the officer who did the kneeling and the officers who are standing around him, all of them have been fired, like immediately. Not put on suspension, not put on leave, fired outright, which means, by the way, a prosecution is coming down the pike. And other law enforcement officials are pointing out that this is insane. According to the Wall Street Journal, Floyd's death in custody draws condemnation from law enforcement officials. So according to law enforcement officials, the FBI, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, they said they are investigating the incident. President Trump tweeted late on Wednesday that he had asked the FBI and the Justice Department to expedite the investigation into Floyd's death. He said, "My heart goes out to George's family and friends. Justice will be served." President Trump himself came out. He said, "We're going to get a full report. We're going to do a full investigation." This should be a situation where there is not actually a lot of controversy. And yet controversy has arisen. The reason there shouldn't be controversy is because we're all reacting the same way, except when it comes to the question of race. And the question of race has become obviously the focal point here, with people immediately jumping to not only was the incident racist, not only is Derek Chauvin racist, but also all of America is racist. And you saw a lot of tweets like this yesterday. All of America is doing this to black people. This is where the conversation starts to break down pretty quickly, because you're leaping beyond the evidence of the incident to make 2 conclusions. 1, that the incident was driven primarily by racism, or even secondarily by racism. And 2, that all of America is responsible, if indeed, even if this officer was a vicious racist who decided to kill a black man that day by putting his knee on the guy's neck. How that indicates all of America is beyond me. I don't see it. We're all condemning it. Like, it's hard to pin an evil act on everyone in America, or on America more broadly, when everyone is condemning the action. I've yet to see a person defending the action of the officer.
But the cop was obviously, it seems from that video, was obviously not behaving according to the rules of policing that I know of or have ever heard a police officer talk about. So now you have the results, right? And the reason the press is so bad, the reason it's so dangerous to have this press that I keep complaining about, the reason it's so bad is because they seize control of the narrative rather than telling the story. Okay? We've got this guy who has been killed, and obviously this reflects a feeling in some black communities that the police are racist against black people. Now, you can cite facts and figures about this forever, but I am perfectly willing to stipulate, as I think any sane white person would be, that my dealings with a police officer are going to be different than a black person's dealings with a police officer. That doesn't mean that cops are racist. It may simply be that, I personally would probably blame the fact that so many criminals are black. A disproportionate number of criminals are black. Now, you can have to go back past that and find out the reasons for that. But the cop on the street is not a sociologist. The cop on the street is just trying to deal with the situation he has. By the way, nothing I say is meant to forgive this police officer for kneeling on that guy's neck, right? That is not the way a police officer is supposed to behave. So please don't misunderstand that I'm saying anything about that. But what I am saying is that clearly it is not the police officer's job to change the sociology of the country. He can't do that. When it gets to him, what he's seen is more black criminals. Likewise, it's not the honest black guy's job to change the sociology of the country. He doesn't have that power any more than the police officer does. And what his experience is that the police are being more suspicious of him, more reactive toward him, meaner, maybe more disrespectful, whatever is happening in that particular instance. And this is the honest guys, the good guys, our fellow citizens' experience. And that is going to filter down into the relationships between the police. So you're looking at that level, at the level of police and the guy on the street, you're looking at tragedy. Tragedy is when something happens that the people involved can't do anything about. The other day, but the problem with the narrative, the problem with a media that seizes the narrative and immediately sells this as a widespread problem is that they make things worse. That is not helping anything. That's not bringing an issue to the fore. That's not bringing something that can be solved to the fore. And once the riots start, it's all over. Conversation is over. Somebody on Twitter tweeted, just before I came on, they tweeted, boy, things would be really different if white men were being murdered by the police daily. And I thought, yeah, they'd be really different if black men were being murdered by the police daily. That's not what's happening. What is happening is a narrative is being pushed by the media that is feeding into a genuine feeling among black people about their relationships to the police, which probably is realistic, right? Their relations with the police are probably different than white people. And the police are reacting to what their problem is on the ground, right? They're seeing, look, if a cop had an app on his phone that could show criminal intent, he could hold it up and it would bleep every time there was criminal intent. Would he be looking at the color of a person's skin? No, he'd be looking at the app, because most cops don't care about the color of the person's skin. They're just trying to prevent crime. But once you're in a situation, whatever caused it, once you're in a situation where a lot of the crime in your neighborhood or on your beat is being committed by black people, that becomes in your mind. There's nothing you can do about this. There's nothing you can do about it. That makes in your mind black skin a clue, right? It means that is going to set off a little ping in your head that this person may be more likely to commit a crime. These are all things that don't have anything to do with the vast majority of good cops and the vast majority of law-abiding black people, but they bring these two groups into conflict, and then the result is this riot, which just makes everything worse.
Practically every day, we're told that white cops are a mortal threat to black men, and some are, obviously. It's what started this whole thing. A black man was killed by the police. It's awful. But what are the national numbers on this? Well, actually, we know the answer. A study from last year found that white police officers were less likely to shoot and kill non-white suspects than non-white police officers were. In any given year, police kill more white suspects, armed and unarmed, than black suspects. And that's a fact, by the way. It's not political propaganda. It's provably true. Yet no one on television will ever say that, because that fact threatens the scams.
Disagree. Well, first off, the statistics about black crime and police brutality overly affecting black males. I mean, we have to look at crime statistics. So yes, black males are overrepresented in prisons, but black males are also overrepresented in crime statistics. So black males are 6% of the 6 or 7% of the population,
right?
6% of the population, because black females are 7% of the population.
I think it's total, it's somewhere around 13.
Yeah, total is 13.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you take all that into account, then you have to consider, okay, so why are they overrepresented in crime? And the reason why, I mean, in my opinion, a lot of it is economic, a lot of it is cultural, a lot of it is the opportunities available in their areas. And people can make the argument that it's because of white oppression. I don't necessarily think it's because of white oppression. I think it has a lot to do with the welfare state. I think it has a lot to do with democratic policies and liberal policies, pushing agendas upon black people instead of giving them agency and allowing them to make their own decisions.
Let me ask you, do you attend TCU?
I do.
How did you get in?
I spent 9 years in the Air Force and got a scholarship, 4-hour scholarship.
Thank you for your service. I appreciate it. So you were in the Air Force. This is what got your scholarship. Do you believe that your path was more difficult to TCU exclusively because of your race?
No, I don't think it's because of my race. I think it's because, I was raised by a single mother. My dad left when I was really young.
Sorry.
My mom had to work really hard to, just get me through school. I made really poor decisions early on in life, and the military is really the only way I could go. And honestly, I learned a lot in the military. I got a lot of, I learned responsibility. I learned taking responsibility for my own actions, and I learned agency and taking pride in myself and work hard. Yeah.
How do you feel about, I'm not totally aware of the scholarship specifically to TCU, but I think everyone is well aware of, and we can agree that there are scholarships obviously afforded exclusively to minorities or women not afforded to, say, the white male. How do you feel about that as a black man? Do you think that helps?
No. Actually, we were just talking about this. I just came from the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, and I mean, you see there, like, Asian prosperity is huge.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing really well, and, like, good on them. And I think, like, honestly, if the black culture adopted a lot of those tenets of, like, Asian culture and, like, hey, suck it up. Like, go out there and get it and do it yourself. And, like, it was interesting, like, a lot of rappers supported Trump. And they said the reason why is because they said, that's what Trump is about. He's like, go out there and get it, make your money. Do what you have to do to make your money.
Right.
And I think, like, that's, people talk about that, but they don't really go out and do it. And, like, there's not a lot of talk about different ways and diversifying your means of income.
Yeah.
There are a lot of opportunities out there if you just go out there and look for them and get it. And honestly, like, people are willing to give black people opportunities.
Well, I'm sure, here's the deal. I understand that there are racists out there.
Oh, yeah,
and I think it's kind of like, a child who just misbehaves so often, you have to discipline them. You kind of see this with the left. Like, if a child behaves well, okay, you don't have to correct them all the time. But when the left constantly just divides by race and by gender, then you have to bounce back and say, well, hold on a second, no, that's actually inaccurate. The truth is, it kind of bars us, it robs us of our ability to be empathetic to someone saying, yeah, you know what, I'm sure you get some tough breaks as a black guy, because we're constantly being told you can't understand and you've gotten everything because you're a white guy. I think it actually burns more bridges than it builds.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think Asians think when they're saying you're too much? They're actually that, they only allot a certain amount of Asians into certain programs. I'm sure you're aware of this.
I punished 3 to 5 ACT points, 0.5 GPA going into college. Like, I applied to USC. Me and my friend, and he's African American, I'm white. I'm Asian. We basically had the same exact demographics.
You forgot?
I grew up in white America. And I had a 32 and a 4.5, and he had a 27 and like a 3.8. He got it, and I didn't get in. And we had basically the exact same everything else, just because he was African American, I was Asian, and I got penalized because of my privilege, because I was overrepresented academic scholarship.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Actually, here, if you want to come up, no, you can stay here. Both. Let's get like a buddy cop film. Sorry. What was your name, sir? David. Sorry, my hands are freezing. Hold on, the lips aren't blue. It's funny that you mentioned that about your ACT scores and how your friend who was African American got in and you didn't. This is one thing that I've always, and I'm glad we can bridge this racial divide. It's like the black and white cookie, Seinfeld. When you think about that, right, they start locking Asians out because you guys do very, very well academically. Yeah. What do you think that does to the relationship between Asian Americans and black Americans? That's always a concern of mine. I mean, the same thing with white Americans, but particularly, listen, I grew up in Canada, and I'm not going to lie, a lot of Asians behind closed doors, little bit racist in Canada. I'm sure there's some of that here too. It seems like it would strain relationships, not really bring people together.
Yeah, I know that because the Asian culture is very academics first, like academics average. It's like with the whole shaming your family kind of like concept you see with like white culture,
right?
Like white media, like they talk about why you not doctor yet? That comes like kind of like racist stuff, yeah. Which is actually can be very true. So and I know the African American, especially in the inner cities, like academic excellence and achievement is very shunned upon, especially with like the gangs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that creates a big divide, especially on like the income, like ethnic, like Chicago, like the top 4 ethnic groups in America, like the top earners are all Asians, Indians, like Japanese, Thai.
Yeah.
And the bottom tiers are African Americans and Hispanics. And I think it's just it's not because of the systematic racism in America. I think it's all culture. Well, like he said, like his dad left him. Really sorry about that. But like. Yeah, the African American single motherhood rate during the civil rights movement was what, like 13-50% depending on the city, whereas now it's upwards of 70-80% in the inner cities, and that's not because of racism from white people. That's because of the shifts in culture in the inner cities.
Let me ask you, do you agree with what he's saying there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the soft bigotry of low expectations. When you tell people that, you can't do anything in life because you have this overlord above you oppressing you, then like what is your, you're not gonna have any optimism. You're not gonna have any aspirations to achieve anything in life,
right?
Because you're like, what's the point? And I think that's told more to black males than it is black females, because there's a statistic that just came out that black females are actually the most educated minority group per capita in the United States.
I did read that, yeah.
Which is like insane. You think about it, it's like, well, how are they oppressed if they're having
Unfortunately, that statistic, if you dig into it, includes a lot of the gender studies and that kind of stuff.
This is not a protest. This is not in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. This is chaos. You're not honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. You're not protesting anything running out with brown liquor in your hands, breaking windows in this city. T.I. and Killer Mike own half the West Side. So when you burn down this city, you're burning down our community. If you want change in America, go and register to vote. Show up at the polls on June 9th. Do it in November. That is the change we need in this country. You are disgracing our city. You are disgracing the life of George Floyd and every other person who has been killed in this country. We are better than this. We're better than this as a city. We are better than this as a country.